It's been a while now, quite a few years ago in fact. Good friends from high school. We all loved the outdoors and the sense of freedom that it provided. We all felt comfortable with each other, had the skills we needed, and so grabbed the opportunity to head into the bush for a few days to see if we could rise to the challenges that we'd encountered. Along with the people, a set of rapids along the way. What a great opportunity to understand what nature put in our path, using the bravado we'd need to prove that we'd be up to the task. No one was ever injured on a portage, but walking down a portage doesn't really provide a memorable experience. So we had a look at the rapids, made mental notes of where the rocks lay hidden beneath the raging current, and mapped out some kind of route that hopefully we'd follow down to the bottom. It looked easy enough. No need for spare paddles and life jackets, so our not-so-brave buddies took that stuff over the portage. As we prepared, we recalled the words of the naturalist writer Sigurd F. Olsen.
Only fools run rapids, say the Indians, but I know this. As long as there are young men with the light of adventure in their eyes and a touch of wildness in their souls, rapids will be run. The elements of chance and danger are wonderful and frightening to experience. And though I bemoan the recklessness of youth, I wonder what the world would be like without it. I know it is wrong. But I'm for the spirit that makes young folk do the things they do. I'm for the glory they know.
Well, we were lucky, and back home the scrape on the forehead will add character and be solid proof that the expedition was a challenge indeed. But a trip in the outdoors, no matter where, brings all kinds of encounters, and sometimes it's with people who have found a personal reason for being there and defining freedom on their own terms. One such person encountered was Wendell Beckwith. After helping to invent the ballpoint pen, he left corporate America and relocated to a distant lake at a location he believed should help him to understand the relationship between science, human beings, and the environment. Wendell had lived here for over 15 years when we had the opportunity to meet with him. He was proud to show how he had related his work on mathematical relationships to not only big thoughts about understanding the universe, but also practical application related to the construction of his cabin.
In this chart here, what we've done, we've superimposed the years into a spiral and plotted on there the amount of the wind and the temperature and the position of the sun and the moon and everything for roughly 3 years. And eventually the study revealed that in this region, when we take temperature readings, for instance, at sunset and sunrise, that for the average for the year, we have a 32-degree temperature. Later on, checking with the Indians to find out when the ice came in and when it went out in this region, we found that roughly it's the transition from ice to water takes place every 6 months. So it's actually dividing the year circle in two. So that indicated that we're at some point of an equity here, or a complete division of the circle. So later on, after several years of study and observing when the ice came in and came out, we found out that the ice was going out over here and coming in over here, and you connect those 2 points, and it goes right through the center of the time circle. And actually measuring the angle of the world's obliquity to the sun at the time when the ice is going in and going out, we found out that at that time the world itself is on the triangle, which is the angle that we're studying in the basic work. So that indicates that here in this place in the world, at this time in history, the ice line is running right through the center of the circle when the world is operating on the triangle through the year. So now we can shift to this business here, which is taking the whole world as a whole into account. And in it, what we have done is to mount the world in a cube. That is, we have here the spherical world and a cubic box, as it were, for the world. And we divided the box in half with the galaxy, or the Milky Way. And we position the world so that its spin axis is tilted to the Milky Way the way it is in our day and age. In the past millenniums, it's been back through here, and in the future, it'll be going in that direction, eventually reach about 6 degrees of the Milky Way before it starts coming back. That whole rhythm period takes 26,000 years, roughly. And if we orient the globe so that whitewater is right on the fluid line of the Milky Way, then it's right in the center of this square. Now, if we go around the corner of the square to the center of the square over here, or the other axis from this axis of whitewater, then it turns out that it's going right through the, I'll get this shifted around here. Then it goes right through the middle of the Red Sea, the Milky Way does. And the center of this square goes and points directly at Egypt, which is the center of the development of civilization about 8,000 years ago. So in history, what man has been doing has been migrating from this axis of this point of the square to this axis of this square, And he's been traveling along the Milky Way because this goes right through the Mediterranean, right through Italy where the Roman Empire was, across the Alps, through the dark ages of medieval era of Northern Europe. Both World War I and World War II were fought on that line. It goes through England with Stonehenge. The Norsemen followed that route across to Greenland and Newfoundland and down into the St. Lawrence, into this region. So the whole flow of mankind appears to be along that line. And it will also be observed that from that point, you can see that Egypt is the center of the Eurasian landmass of the world, and with its arid belts. And then if we turn around and look at the world from the other side, directly opposite from there, then we see that the center is the exact center of the Pacific Ocean. So as a result, this region of whitewater is equatorial on this east-west polar axis, where one half of the world is above the water line, or high tide, and the other half of the world is running at low tide. The water line, or high tide, and the other half of the world is running at low tide. And eventually it appears that this high tide will suddenly be released from a harmonic node, which it's now in, and will distribute around the world, flood much of the old world, and become centered around the North Pole axis. Thus, this equatorial region that we're in contains the tree line and the Precambrian shield, which is the backbone of the North American continent. And to this part of the world, humanity is flowing from the other parts of the world, and it's a great gene pool of humanity. Back in high school, we learned that you could bisect a triangle any number of ways, but trisection was impossible. And we later learned that Einstein stated that mathematically a trisection was impossible. So one of the first things we endeavored to do was to study this business of the trisection, of the angle. And we found that actually trisection, or a trilogy, was the all possible thing that did exist in the world. That is, material exists in a solid, liquid, gaseous state. We have the sun, earth, moon. Human beings exist as white people, Negroids, or Asiatics, and so on. You can see all kinds of trilogies of things in nature and everything that we observe. So we started studying the triangle in great detail, and we found that eventually the right triangle was a very important angle when the base of the triangle was equivalent to the perimeter of a circle, and its altitude was equivalent to its diameter. And that turned out to be what we call the pi angle, because the relationship of the altitude to the base was equivalent to pi. And we recognized primarily that that pi angle is being exhibited in the spruce trees of the timberline. So the work indicated that it was such a universal angle that eventually we would find a place on Earth where we would actually see this pi angle in action with natural history. In coming up here, we had this pi angle in mind, and one of the things we did was to apply the pi angle in making and designing the building. For instance, in running the walls up, we used the pi angle to determine how far out to come with an eave. For instance, if an eave is too close, you get too much moisture on the walls. If it's too far out, you get too much drying effect, and you get a dry rot. So to solve the problem, we just solve it the way nature does, and that's to use the pi angle, which is running up 314 and out 1. And thus the eave is set on that angle. So when it came time to put the shakes on the roof, we found that cedar was too twisted, and we couldn't split them in the conventional manner to make cedar shakes. So we went to the pi angle and cut jack pine on a long triangular bias cut through the tree and laid them up on the roof in a fish scale manner. And that made a roof which has given us a great deal of warmth. We don't lose our snow. and makes a real nice roof. And then in the front, you come around the front, we'll see how it looks in the front. So when you get around to the front here, you can see the effect of the triangle here. Now, as you get to the maximum height of the building, then the triangle extends the ridgepole out further, and that gives that Swiss effect to the gables. And also, then you can see up there's the three-colored or tricolor diamonds up there in the gable also, which fits into the picture of the overall trilogy of the study. And when it comes to the door, the upper half of the door is the radiant factor, and the lower half is the graviton factor, gravitation. And then here we have the symbol of the Ojibwe Indian, which is a heart. They don't work in diametric designs. They employ the natural leaf, flowers, vines, and hearts in all their beadwork. The thing they discovered in England, in building Stonehenge in England, is that the sun and the moon are at complete right angles to each other.
We left Wendell's place with more questions than answers, but it showed how important the place was in coming to grips with what the outdoors offered. Again, we recall thoughts from Sigurd Olsen.
We know our basic human needs, that people are part of all that has gone before. Their hunger and discontent, an inescapable longing for the old simplicities once known, that we are in truth children of the earth and cannot change. It is wholesomeness we are seeking, and being in tune with ancient rhythms and the intangible values of a life we've abandoned. We also know we cannot forsake our technologies, but must find a balance between it and the environment. If we can use this tremendous backlog of knowledge to work towards the preservation of land instead of its desecration, if we can improve the quality of life, change our priorities, achieve balance, and understanding of our role as human beings in a complex world, this coming era may well set the stage for a richer civilization than humanity has ever known.
Later we met Bob and Wendy Pay. We discovered that Bob was the director of outdoor education at Queen's University and had started both the Minnesota Outward Bound School and, with the assistance of his daughter Wendy, the Canadian Bound School north of Thunder Bay. It was a great chance to talk with them about the importance of the outdoors on a very personal level.
The course is something that Wendy works in as a program, and really what makes up a course is more important than anything I'd say about Outward Bound. Outward Bound really is just intended to acquaint people with possibilities, inside themselves. You may be interested in freedom, and in relationships, you are a group of four guys or something that holds you together. And then there's the environment beyond, what we create when we interact with each other. It's this stuff around here that is wilderness. It's the stuff back home that man makes. But Wendy is program director of this particular school, and she can describe the courses to you.
Well, an Outward Bound course involves a lot of what you people are doing in terms of getting out in the woods and experiencing each other and themselves. We have a typical course is 25 days, and it starts out usually with a short trip right in the woods so people can learn by experiential education, just jumping into the experience totally right away, and then coming in to what we call our home place for a few days to play on some different obstacles we have, maybe do a little rock climbing, try whitewater kayaking, and prepare for a long expedition where they'll go out for probably a couple of weeks.
We were on Whitewater Lake the other day, and we came up to this building. It was a house. A guy lived there.
soul color. He was all by himself. It looked really weird because he had nobody around him. I think his name was Wendell.
Wendell Beckwith.
That's his name.
I've been up there. He's really quite a guy. Did you talk to him very much?
Yeah, I guess we did. We were talking to him for a while. We stayed there for a while and then he left.
He's been up there about 15 years, just living in the bush. And that house he built completely with the Indians, just with axes and saws. And he wouldn't use any mechanics, but the furniture is just really well done. He's made his own designs. He made his 3-legged chairs, figuring 4 legs weren't necessary.
You did a thing up there all alone. What did you do?
Well, he was into research and development in northern Wisconsin for a long time. He's an inventor and inventing different tools. He was in on making a ballpoint pen, a successful item to sell for the Parker Pen Company. And he was finding that when he was working and discovering new things, that other people in Sweden and other countries were discovering the same things he was at the same time. And that kind of got him to thinking about why that was happening. And he thought maybe if he went into the bush and just tried to completely cleanse his brain, he calls it brainwashing, of any knowledge that he had acquired in terms of books and people telling him, that maybe he'd start to see a new pattern to things, and maybe he'd make some new fundamental discoveries in terms of the universe and how it works. So he went up, he started walking north, and this guy caught him and said, look, I want a cabin up north, let's go build one. So he went up to Whitewater Lake with this guy, and he built the cabin in, I think, about a year. And then he just lived there all by himself, and he'd just sit and he'd watch the waves, and he'd watch the ice come in, he'd watch the leaves fall. He'd sit and look at things and not make any conclusions, just look. And I guess we met him, after he'd been up there about 4 years? And at that time, he was just starting to notice that things were flowing in kind of a rhythm that he thought was somewhere around the concept of pi, 3.414, whatever it is. And he was talking about that. At that point, he wouldn't take any books, or he would never write anyone any letters. He told us to feel welcome to visit him. He wasn't anti-people, but his work, it was just the essence of what he was doing. He was satisfied. So he kept on doing that, and now he's been up there 15 years, and he has a whole theory of the universe that's unique and different. And it's not really important to him that he spread the good word so much as that he just keeps studying. His work is the whole basis of what he does. He's like an artist who has something inside they have to express. It doesn't really matter with an artist if somebody buys a painting and looks at it. What it matters to him is making that painting and making that expression of what he feels inside. And Wendell's work is much the same to him. He just feels that studying the universe and what's around him teaches him a lot. And he's at a point now where he feels like he'd like to share some of that and bring other people in. He accepts books now, he writes letters. He's even got a little pocket calculator to do some of his math with, which a few years ago would have seemed really alien to him. He lives very simply. He doesn't have any money. What he does is he designs buildings. And if you stop by Outward Bound later on and visit, I'll show you his drawings. He designs buildings that are completely in tune with the environment, and he'll trade those to people. They'll come up and visit him and say, well, I got some land, and I'd like to put up a cabin, but I don't know what to put up. And he'll say, well, let me think about it. What kind of place are you interested in? Do you want to heat with wood? You're going to have electricity. By the time the people leave, they'll say, well, here's a sketch, and it'll be something completely different. Like one sketch he's designed that I've got is called the snail, and it's kind of a circular shape and then with a little spiral on it that some of us are going to go up and help him build. And he just was sitting on the beach and he saw a snail go by and he wondered about that design and how a snail survives and what the strengths are of that shape. And so he made that design for a building for himself. But he'd design a building for someone and then they'd give him a carton of food or something like that he could use up there in exchange for his work. He doesn't believe in money. He won't take money. When he first moved up there and started building, the Canadian government got real excited because he hadn't leased the land and he didn't belong up there and he was an American and they came in and they said, well, you just can't do this. And he said, I'm not hurting anything, and I'm giving, at that time there were still Indians living on whitewater all year round. I'm giving the Indians some employment, and besides, I'm not a citizen of any country. He denies that he has citizenship. And that put them in a quandary. They said, well, what are we going to do with this guy? And I think it took them about 10 years to finally decide that they would bend the rules a little bit to have this man up there. So they say he's up there doing basic research.
As Wendy mentioned, why he for a while was completely separated from family. I think it's pursuit of the truth, his way, and although I suppose his family felt deprived, I don't think he's hurt anybody by going his way, because he doesn't interfere. He just does things his way. Now, one way to get at a question like that is to take a look at what makes things make sense to you. You know, what about you? Now, you can be like the guy that jumps on a horse and he tries to go in every direction at once. He doesn't get very far. Or you can be like a person who might say that any road can take me where I want to go, and at the same time be also saying I don't know where it is. But what about you? You know, what counts most to you? What do you believe in?
I haven't really given that thought. I don't really know what's most important to me.
What about you, Ron? What makes things hang together? You know, is there something you believe in or value that makes sense of where you are right now?
Well, I guess me myself, I value my freedom. Yeah. Like to be free and not have someone tell you what to do, and yet like certain way you have to sweep the floor or something like that.
You want to be able to make some choices. How do you guys balance the fact there are other people in the world? You know, now maybe what makes things hang together for me is the fact that I think it is possible for me and other people to have some choices so that they aren't like a doorknob. You know, anybody can turn the door unless the door is locked and so on and so forth. And I feel it's important for me to be able to make some choices and to fulfill ideas that I have about things I want to do. But at the same time, there are other people in the world, and that adds some limits to what I can do. How do you guys balance the fact that maybe freedom isn't, you know, a pure thing? I drive my car. I have to stop when the sign says stop. How much of limits can still give you, for example, that freedom you want? Do you see them as necessary to the freedom? And how do you balance the fact there are other people here besides Ron? You know, it's not all Ron's world. How do you cope with that?
In order to get like what you want, like out of life, is you have to bend. Like, you know, when a sign says stop, you have to stop. Yeah. In order not to conflict with anybody else. And so, like, if you want to go from point A to point B, you just can't go straight. You have to go in a roundabout way. It's sort of as though, you know, in a way, to get what you want, you have to help others so that you use them as a means to get what you want. But it's not really using the word.
In a large canoe, there's 6 guys paddling at once, right? Or 6 people in a large canoe. In a small canoe, there are 2 and sometimes 3. If they all each paddle when they want to paddle, is the canoe going to get to where they want it to go as quickly? Do they have to get together? Are there advantages in paddling at the same time? People are queuing it. You follow me? You paddle when you want to paddle. You paddle when you want to paddle. I paddle when I want to paddle.
It's right. If you don't think it's right, if everybody else is paddling and you're sitting there and think it's wrong, well then you shouldn't do it. You got to think what's right for the other people as well as you.
Well, that's what you were saying. you were saying earlier, in other words, when you're saying my freedom is fine. If it interferes with Ron's freedom, then it's wrong, yeah. And I was interested in a couple other words you were using. You were talking about thinking and knowing, and I think meaning, maybe without realizing it, that knowing is different than thinking. Knowing is something I just know, because certain things have happened to me that make me believe something, and I know it. And there's a big difference, I think. Well, I'm glad we met on the trail.
That's a nice thing.
Yeah, outward bound is really an idea, and you guys have got your ideas, and they're similar. And you can do for yourselves if you follow up the pep talk that you were giving us a few minutes ago, about getting going. I think you don't need a program like ours, but nonetheless, we become stronger if we can communicate with you.
In the southern Ontario area of Quetico Provincial Park in the middle of nowhere, we were able to stop at an island straddling the Canada-USA border and enjoy a bottle of ice-cold root beer made by Dorothy Moulter. Knife Lake Dorothy lived here for 56 years before it became a part of the Quetico and Boundary Waters canoe area.
It's 1930, most of the time. But these people have been coming up maybe 5 or 6 years.
Right.
And they always stop and get their root beer. Yeah. And they saw me feeding sunflower seeds to the birds one time. And of course, I guess that's a sunflower state.
Is it?
So I think Kansas is. So they bring me sunflower seeds.
Whereabouts did you actually come from before you
moved
up here?
Directly before I come up here, I was from Chicago. I was born in Pennsylvania, around the Pittsburgh area. And I lived in Cleveland, Dayton, Cincinnati, Garrett, Indiana, and just those states. That was all when I was little, though, mostly. So by the time I reached high school, then I was in Chicago. I lived there most of the time before I came up here. Yeah. I didn't start making root beer until about 1950. Actually, I think about 1952. We used to make this according to the recipe that comes with the bottle of extract. We use the root beer extract and about a half a cupful of the root beer syrup and sugar and water. And make 8 gallons. Mix it all up. That's warm water. Mix it all up, and then when it's all mixed up, the sugar thoroughly dissolved, then we add a little speck of yeast. We used to make it according to the recipe on the bottle, which called for about a half a teaspoon of yeast, which made it ripen faster. But you tasted too much of the yeast in it. So we decided to cut down on the amount of yeast. So each time we made it after that, we'd take a little less yeast. So we finally got it just about where we want it, down to about a quarter of a teaspoon, or even less than that. According to the recipe, we would make... a half a teaspoon would make about 100 bottles. But according to our recipe, we used a quarter of a teaspoon for 150 bottles. So that's quite a bit less than half the amount of yeast.
What's the difference?
And it takes longer for it to age, but it tastes a lot better. You don't get that yeasty taste. And the kids seem to like it a lot better that way. And by adding a little bit of the root beer syrup, you can eliminate a cup of sugar, add the syrup, and it gives it a little more root beer flavor. So it goes pretty good. It keeps us busy making it. And you have to keep making it every day, so while the old stuff is going, the new stuff is aging. So 2 weeks, sometimes it gets a chance to age 2 weeks. The longer it gets a chance to age, the better it is.
Having the opportunity to stop by and visit others who are living off the grid, we couldn't help thinking that these people would have been as comfortable greeting the fur gatherers and traders of centuries past as the canoeists of today. They were completely at peace with both their lifestyle and the freedom that they had found in their secluded locations in the bush. When we found quiet times, and after seeing and experiencing so much, we had a chance to consider the thoughts and questions put to us by the folks we had met.
How do you guys feel about trying things where you don't know what's going to happen? That's a kind of freedom too, you know, where you can't predict. You mentioned you hadn't thought about it, but when you do something new and different, you don't know what's going to happen. There's a little risk involved, right? How do you feel about that? We make a lot of things in school, you know, about failure. If you fail, it's often you haven't learned anything. I don't buy that, but I wondered how you cope with doing things where maybe you're going to make a mistake. Is it okay? I think that's what Samuel Hillel and this man interests me. I wonder why people do what they do and what gives life meaning. You know? And this man has interested me for a long time. And he said, if I'm not for myself, who then is for me? In other words, what I've got now, what I'm saying now is me. It's my experience. It's not your experience. It's limited to me, but it's mine. You know, that's what I believe. But he went on to say, but if I am for myself alone, what am I? And then the other thing that I think one of you was implying is it not now, when? You know, if I want to be more like this, it can be. Why don't I get started now rather than waiting? If I want to get to Whitewater Lake and I can't fly it, I've got to plan my journey. And I've got to portage, I've got to paddle, I've got to go make a series of steps before I get to Whitewater. And sometimes people let go or abandon the idea of a goal because it looks so distant, you know, it's way out there. Or they accept it as being way out there and forget that there's steps in between.
Actually, we don't know why man pursues knowledge, but that seems to be the distinctive thing about man, is that he's given to be very inquisitive, to learn, and to apply that knowledge one way or another. Thus, man is becoming more and more distinct, as it were, from trees and animals and everything else. And it's all due to this business of pursuing knowledge. So in basic research, all we're doing is fundamentally admitting we don't know, but we're pursuing. We're given the pursuit of knowledge. What we're going to do with the knowledge, we don't know.
Those who have had an opportunity to share the areas of the country that we call the wilds know the value of such places. As more and more time is spent in urban locations, we can't help but wonder what it is to become of all this, and the personal definitions of freedom in a society where the value of those places is removed further and further away from our daily lives. Is it worth the price of taking an unpopular stand for the ethics of preservation? We won't all have the chance to embark on such a trip into such a place, but the thought that such places still exist gives hope that these places will still exist for not only the present, but also for future generations.
I never thought of it, really. I didn't, like, I don't know, I just didn't give myself that chance of thinking of what I really wanted in life. Don't you think freedom's important? What do you consider freedom? Well, people are